Ready?
Ready when you are. Thank you kindly. Just wait for Mickey to settle, huh? Okay, anytime you're ready, Tom.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning, Sister Margie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it a lot.
You're welcome.
Well, the first question I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, is to say your name and also spell your name.
Yeah. My name is Margaret, Sister Margaret Beatty, Margaret Beatty, but most people call me Sister Margie. Yeah.
Thank you. And does Sister Margie have what is now known as a preferred pronoun?
She, please.
And I'd be really interested, if you don't mind, if we could spend a little time just learning about you personally.
Uh-huh.
And I'd be curious, like where you were born and kind of how you became the person you are today. And I'm going to leave those as very big, open-ended questions, but as we go forward, I might poke in a little bit as well, okay?
Okay, sure.
Great.
Well, I grew up in Baltimore, but Baltimore County. My parents lived in the country. And I loved living in the country. I mean, we didn't have a bus, we didn't have a movie theater. That, of course, it was a long time ago, but it was a wonderful time to grow up and a wonderful place to grow up. And I went to Catholic school my whole life, and I had one brother. So is that the kind of thing you're thinking?
Yeah, and let me ask, when you were in Catholic school, how big were the classes? I mean, is this like a little country school? Is it a bigger school? I mean, what's it feel like? I mean, for you in that time, and how long ago are we talking?
Yeah, I started in the first grade in 1946, so it was right after the war, and there were a lot of children. So we had pretty large classes, but we had, all sisters. They were Franciscan sisters. They weren't the Sisters of Mercy. And so the classes were large, but we got a good education there. And then I went to a Catholic high school, too, in the city. It was called the Catholic High School. And that was an excellent education. Again, we were taught by the sisters. I was on the debate team at that time, and I learned a lot, in that experience, and made very good friends there. And then I went on to college, to Mount St. Agnes College, but I was a day hop, so it was quite a long ride every day. In fact, I got 2 tickets one time in 3 days. But anyway, so that was but I only went 1 year to the college, and then I entered the community. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, sister, if you don't mind, would you do this without the notes in your hand?
Sure.
We can actually hear that
Sure.
rustling.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
That's fine.
So then you entered the community after 1 year in college.
Right, uh-huh.
I do want to go back just a little bit and ask about your mom and your dad.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of work and just their impact on your life.
Yeah. I had wonderful parents. Both parents were wonderful. And my mother was a very loving person. They were stay-at-home moms in those days. And she was a city girl. She grew up in the city. But she moved down to what was called Bowley's Quarters because her sister had started a business, a restaurant, because it was quite near the Chesapeake Bay. Not on the Chesapeake Bay, but very near it. It was sort of on the route. And so my dad, he teased about turning her into a country girl because we raised chickens, we grew vegetables to sell at the front door, at the front yard. And my mom had to kill the chickens. She had a hatchet but this simple, good lady cut their heads off. And, my dad, his real career was as a steel worker. So he worked on bridges and elevators and that kinds of thing. And then he retired eventually, and he worked as a construction consultant. But they were very good people, very simple. But religion was really part, especially of my mother's life. I mean, we just grew up with it, and we accepted it, and so. And at that time, a lot of women, young women, were entering religious life. Like 31 women entered with me in 1959, but there are only, I think, 9 left. You know, things happened and they developed in different ways, and so a lot of people left.
But you've not left.
No, I've not left, and I've been very happy. And I never really had the desire to leave. I've just been happy. That's all I can say in everything that I've done.
And then how did you get from the Baltimore area to Savannah? How did that happen?
Oh, well, I had quite a history of jobs or ministries. You know, I taught young women in high school for 13 years. Then I had a ministry, a volunteer work at the city jail, at the Baltimore City Jail for the women, the Women's Detention Center, for 8 years. Well, then I actually got a job with them, and I was paid to be a chaplain. And then I got elected to community leadership, and I did that for 15 years. And I had to leave the jail because I got elected. It's quite a different process, but anyway, I started community leadership, and eventually became the head of the community. And in that role, I was on the board of St. Joseph's Hospital here. At that time, it was just St. Joseph's. Sister Faith was the administrator. And anyway, I got to know St. Joseph's. Mr. Hinchy was hired during that time. It was a really interesting time. And we were still St. Joseph's. But then in 1997, Mr. Hinchy, we had the joint operating agreement. That's another story I'll be glad to tell you about. But Mr. Hinchy always tried to get me to come to Savannah. And I really liked it, I have to say. I had a lot of friends here and so on. And so I listened to him, but when I finished my leadership, you were elected for a certain time. When I finished that, he started again, come to Savannah. And so that's when I came. That was in 2001.
Well, obviously, being being part of the Sisters of Mercy, I mean, that is in many ways who you are.
Yes.
As a person.
Yes.
And I'd be curious, could you talk a little bit about the Sisters of Mercy, who founded them, and sort of guiding principles? Can you help us understand, again, because that has certainly developed a great part of who you are as a person, about the Sisters of Mercy and kind of their guiding principles, and the founder particularly.
Oh, yeah. The founder was a great woman. She founded the Sisters of Mercy in Dublin, Ireland, and the official start date was 1831. But she was 45 years old at the time, so she was kind of, she was considered an older lady. But she always had the desire to help, particularly the poor women and children that she saw in the streets. And she kind of got that started from her dad, who always was attentive to the poor. And although he died when she was only 5, he really that idea never left her mind, and she always wanted to do something. And she wound up caring for an older lady who didn't have any children. She had a husband, but she had, I'm not sure what disease she had, but she was an invalid. Her name was Mrs. Callahan. And she lived with that couple for 20 years and took care of them, took care of her first, and she died. and then Mr. Callahan. And the lady was a Quaker. And, speaking of, interreligion and
Interfaith,
yeah,
sure.
interfaith, excuse me. She really got the best of the Quaker, and she still had that Catholic heritage from her father. And Mrs. Callahan asked her to read her the scripture, and Catholics didn't read scripture in those days. Many people couldn't read in Ireland because of the English laws. And so she heard the scripture that she read, and that just sort of solidified her desire. Then both of them died, and lo and behold, they left their estate to her, and it was 25,000 pounds. But that was only, in these days it would be about $1 million. So she set up a house in Dublin, which would be akin to building a house for the poor in Ardsley Park here in Savannah. It was a very lovely section. And she took in the women to educate them. Well, first of all, to give them shelter. And she took them in, the women, to educate them, and the children, too, to be educated. There were a lot of orphans, of course, because there was still widespread disease. And she built this house on Bagot Street in London, and, Lord help me, in Dublin. And you can imagine that it really grew. And she didn't want to be a sister. She didn't want to be a religious community, because in those days, religious women were sort of locked up. They were cloistered, so they didn't get out much. But she said her sisters, if she did this, would have to be walking nuns. And, that's always kind of stuck with us, that we go out to where the need is and, care for whoever needs it. So she did. She went into the streets. They went into hospitals, prisons. There's great stories about them, even the early ones. And a lot of the early ones, there were a lot of women who wanted to be religious or wanted to be part of this endeavor, and they, a lot of them came to her. So she took them in, but a lot of them died because there was so much disease, cholera and typhoid and that kind of thing. So she had a lot of requests from other people in the area to come to their little town, to come to other places outside of Dublin. And so she eventually sent them out in little groups, and they started what they called foundations. So in 1845, the Sisters of Mercy came to Savannah. And they came from Dublin, of course. They came from Charleston. And they weren't technically Sisters of Mercy. They were the Sisters of Charity of Our Lady of Mercy. They had the patron of Our Lady of Mercy. And it's a kind of a complicated story, but the bishop had gone to Catherine Macaulay and asked him for sisters. And the Bishop of Charleston now, that was the whole sort of all of Georgia and South Carolina, and there was one bishop. And she said she just didn't have the sisters. So he started his own community called the Sisters of Charity of Our Lady of Mercy. And they are the ones that came to Savannah in 1845. It's a great story. We have a kind of a rose window at St. Joseph's Hospital that depicts the history of the Sisters of Mercy there. And so that got them started. They were well received, and they did the same works. They educated mostly children, and took in orphans and young women who needed education, and education of things that they could earn a living. They established them. That's another thing about the sisters. They don't just give out money or give out food. They try. We we address the causes of poverty. And so even then, they did that. And so from that foundation, which was 1845, and in 1875, this is going on to found St. Joseph's, this doctor in the city asked them if they would take care of the seamen who were sick. And they said, okay, that was a need. And so these sisters came from St. Vincent's Academy on Liberty Street and walked down to East Broad and Gordon Street, I think it was. And they were given a little house, an abandoned house of some kind, and they started caring for the sick there. And they didn't have water in the house, of course. They had a well in the yard, and they had to care for the ones that were in the upper floor in the attic by climbing a rope ladder. That's kind of tradition, but I think it's true. They climbed a rope ladder to take up the medicine and food and to care for those patients on the floors. And fortunately, I think those were the black patients, the African American patients. But they took care of them, which is important. So they were there for a few months, and it was quite a burden. So then they were given a larger spot. I'm not sure the exact location of that, but it was a few blocks away. And that's when they called it a hospital, St. Joseph's Infirmary. And this is a little addition, but from that grew St. Joseph's Infirmary in Atlanta. See, there were, whoever was, I guess, the bishop or the people in Atlanta who needed care, needed a hospital, they said, how about your sisters coming up and getting us started? I don't know if they said exactly that, but that was sort of the version. And so they did, and I think 2 sisters went up, and the legend of that is that now they had to travel. It takes us 4 hours now to go up there to Atlanta, but it took them quite a long time, I'm sure. And they founded St. Joseph's Hospital. It was called St. Joseph's Infirmary. It was downtown in Atlanta. And now it's way out on up northeast side, I think it is. So they're sort of our children, They're from St. Joseph's to St. Joseph's Infirmary.
You mentioned this rose window.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if I were to ask you to close your eyes and see that window in your mind, and what do you see?
Oh, I see a rich history of what the sisters did and are doing in Savannah. It shows the typhoid epidemic and how they ministered to the sick on the streets. It shows first their arrival from Charleston, then it shows that kind of thing, and just really how their work evolved all the way, like teaching children, teaching high school. St. Vincent's Academy has been there since 1845. Then the St. Joseph's Hospital downtown. Then the new St. Joseph's in 1970. And then the merger, or the JOA, the Joint Operating Agreement. And then the kind of works we're doing today. So it's quite beautiful.
In more than one way, it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, and Sister Jude, who's since passed on to God, was the person that gave me a lot of that information. She was a terrible loss when she died because she knew all of the history, just right on her fingertips.
If we may, could you talk a little bit about St. Joseph's? We've talked about sort of St. Joseph's. You helped us with the history there. Could you talk a little bit more about St. Joseph's and how St. Joseph's over the past 50 years has changed and grown?
Yeah. Well, healthcare has been a very dynamic organization, I'd say. And I think when we merged, we came together with Candler. That was a huge step, and now I can talk a little bit about that. That was a scary step, but you know, I was called the provincial at that time. I was the sister in charge, and I didn't work here then, and in 1997, so I had to come down here and work with the people who wanted to do the merger, and that's quite an interesting story. I mean, the gentlemen from Candler and St. Joseph's were kind of contemporary. Well, they were contemporaries, and they were friends. So they were at a wedding reception, I understand, and they started to talk about what about if they merged, if they came together and became one organization. And there was back and forth about it, and they said they were smoking cigars, at this wedding reception, and one of the men, Harvey Granger, his son was a lawyer for the Baptist Hospital in Jacksonville, and he said his son was working for a joint operating agreement with Baptist and St. Vincent's, I think it is. Anyway, but at that time it was thriving. It was just initiated. He said we should talk to him and get some information. So they did, and the fact that they were friends, and that they saw the need. St. Joseph's had a lot of resources in terms of the buildings and campus. So did Candler, but they saw the need to come together to serve the people of Savannah. And that's the thing that motivated me to not be afraid. First of all, I trusted them. But secondly, I thought that they really, they saw that fact that this was going to make better health care for the people of Savannah. And in fact, it has. It's just been great.
Could you help me understand, have you had to sort of take sort of special care or to sort of accommodate these different faith traditions, as you run this facility now?
Yeah, at first I think they thought we were going to try to convert everybody to be Catholic. That wasn't even in my mind. I didn't even think about it. But we got to know them, and this is the key to everything. We built relationships with those people, and they were good. They were all men. They were good men, and I was the only lady there, and we just built good relationships. And eventually, I think they came to trust me. The fact that, I said we wanted to do this for the good of Savannah, and it would be a local organization, locally run, and that has proven true today. So we did that. Now, then subsequently they called me and said, we're supposed to hire a vice president for mission, but we wanted to be a sister, and they couldn't find a sister. So they said, what can we do? And so then I went down and I met with I'm going to have a hard time remembering his name, Archie Davis and Cecil Abar and Jane Nangle, who was the attorney for the hospital. And I think I just promised them that we wouldn't try to convert people. So, and it has worked. I have to say, the Jacksonville merger that was pending didn't work at all. It fell apart. But ours grew pretty easily, and maybe I'm naive, but I think it's worked very well. We have a strong presence of the Methodist Church. The director of pastoral care is the longtime Methodist minister, Reverend Burns, and we are very careful not to impose Catholicism on them. And as a result, they respect, I think, our leaders and our rules, which they had to work out, all of that, they respected, and there's that element of respect both ways today.
Let me ask, you mentioned they were all men,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm imagining that in a great part of your career, you've been at many tables where they were all men, less now than in the past.
Right.
And since this is going to be archived, I just wonder, you mentioned several of those good men. Can you just keep thinking of names? People, I mean, who was around those tables? Who were the men that were able to trust each other to go forward?
Yeah, well, Arnold Tenenbaum was a person I haven't mentioned before. He, oh, bless his heart, he was fantastic. And Archie Davis and Harvey Granger. Oh, Lord, I'm going to forget them. I didn't think I'd ever forget them. There were three on each side. What I shouldn't say on each side, but there were three representatives from each one, and Mr. Hinchy was there, of course.
How would you describe the role that Arnold played in that experience?
Oh, he was a wise man. I think now he was Jewish, but and I shouldn't say but he was. I just loved him, and his wife Lorelei. She was a dear. And they've both died now. They died from COVID.
And ironically, where did they come for their medical care after they contracted COVID?
Oh yeah, St. Joseph's Canner. Yeah, I know. But it was the wisdom, the experience, the respect that he had earned because of his business, and I think his tolerance for all the people of Savannah. That was true of all of them, I'd say. Cecil Abar was, oh gosh, he was delight, but he was a little bit suspicious of us at first. Didn't last long. And it turned out he had to go to some Methodist conference, because he was one of the leaders in the Methodist Church, some Methodist conference in England. And so he was on a tour bus with the group that was, invited to this meeting. And there was a Catholic bishop there. Well, then he told me, he came back, he said, guess what? There was a Catholic bishop on our tour bus. And I told him about you, and I told him about how we came together. And he was so proud of himself. I mean, he really, really grew into that. He and his wife both. I mean, they there was an element of respect. But it's the personal connection. That's the thing that does it. He was my friend, and yeah.
Yeah. What you're describing, let me ask this. Do you think that what you're describing, is that still true in this modern world we're in now? This notion that you have to build trust and that you have to build relationship if you're going to move forward? Or is that being given away, or do you believe that is still the essential element?
Well, I don't know if it's given way. I mean, our world is tainted now with all kinds of division. So, but whether it is accepted or not, it works. It's the only thing that works. And the question that this on that paper that you might ask is about what we say to young people. That's what we got to do. We got to get them out of their isolated areas of experience and to meet other people. And that's how that's how their imagination, their respect is going to grow. Only that, person to person.
And we'll come back to that. And
Okay, okay.
That's great. No, and the good news about this, just so you know, these guys chop and dice all this.
Yes,
right?
sure.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, if we could, some of the other sort of healthcare providing entities in Savannah that have over time St. Joseph's has been connected to and involved with. For example, Central Georgia Railroad Hospital. I mean, let's talk about that.
Yeah. now, of course, that happened a while ago, and I wasn't there, but we did a little class. It was called Leadership Academy, I think, and we put people in groups, and we took those 5 hospitals, and they researched each one, and I mean that was that was the Candler part that brought them in. So when we merged, we took them too. Of course, they were already there as Mary Telfair. Yeah, and Mary Telfair, we have a special place for them in our hearts because she cared for women. I don't know how much you know about Mary Telfair, but she was a very wealthy lady. She never married because she didn't want her husband to control her money. And when she died, she left her estate to the Telfair Museum, but also to the care of women. And she established the Telfair directresses. And there were no men. They're directresses. And that is passed down today, mostly wealthy women who have accepted the responsibility of the Telfair Hospital. And I mean, it's part of St. Joseph's Candler now, but I think she was not unlike Catherine McCauley. I mean, she was rich and she took care of women and in her own way. So, yeah, I know the most about her really because because she's quite a leader and she acted on that.
We've talked a little bit about how healthcare has changed in this region. Would you mind helping us learn a little bit more about some of the ways that St. Joseph's has been part of that? I think of Georgia Infirmary, for example. I think of St. Mary's a little bit, maybe Good Samaritan. I know you know much more about these places than I do, but would you mind just helping us kind of understand that?
Yeah. Well, the healthcare has developed into a whole different industry now than it was originally. But I think Mr. Hinchy really he got it that we had to be up to date and informed, and even Sister Faith before him, when we had the heart hospital that began and the care of people with heart attacks. She was very involved in that. I'm sorry, go back over the question.
Well, I need to take a water break.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
You want to cut for a second, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
I've got a little.
And, okay. All right, great. And I'll allow him to pull.
So the foundress of the Sisters of Mercy was Catherine McCauley. So we have McCauley Drive and, the hospital. We have Mercy Drive and McCauley Boulevard. So it was in 1831. She was 45 years old, and she only lived 10 years after she established the Sisters of Mercy. So she was quite a leader, I think, in that at some point there were something like 7,000 Sisters of Mercy. There aren't any more, but and that was Dublin. Bagot Street is the name, and that building is still there. You can go there, and you can even stay there, make a retreat, and she's buried in the garden there. And there's a statue of her in the front of the building, where she has welcoming a woman with a baby. So that's sort of symbolic of the kind of work that we do.
So this is a life of service.
Yeah, it is. It is. Mm-hmm.
Much of it before she became, much of it very personal, private service.
Yeah.
To the people that she took care of for 20 years.
Right.
I mean, but it's a life of service.
Right.
Her life.
Yeah. That's. I guess I just take that for granted, but that's important to remember. And in fact, this is interesting. The Sisters of Mercy take a fourth vow, and it's a vow of service. We take 3 vows, the canonical vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. But we take a 4th vow, a service to the poor, sick, and uneducated.
Let's talk, if we could. We're going to kind of come back into the modern world, if you
Yeah.
may. Let's talk a little bit about some of the outreach programs that St. Joseph's has, initiated over the years, and you'll know a lot more about these than I will.
Yeah.
Georgia Infirmary is one that comes to mind.
Yeah, the Georgia Infirmary, we inherited, of course, but it's a fantastic organization. It was founded by Thomas Francis Williams in somewhere around in there, and it was founded as a rest home or hospital for sick African Americans, mostly slaves, and Thomas Francis Williams, the story there is that he wanted to see that an overseer was persecuted, or not persecuted, prosecuted for killing a black man, and the court in those days was in the church, and he took this case to the church court, and they denied him. They said no, and eventually they excommunicated him, and he was so angry that that's when he founded the Georgia Infirmary, and it became quite a wonderful organization that cares for the poorest of the poor, people who are on Social Security or have no Social Security. A lot of people, black people in those days, didn't pay into Social Security. So he took care of them and got what they needed and provided just care in their homes or care in and then it was a hospital, first I think a tuberculosis hospital eventually. And today, you can meet some grandmothers that were nurses and had their training there, or they were born there. I met a man just one day. I was waiting for a ride at a doctor's office, and I sat next to this man, and he said he had been in jail for a long time. He was an older gentleman, and he said he came back to Savannah, and he said, I was born at that hospital on Abercorn Street there, and he was a nice man. He was out of jail, and he had a place to live. And I think he was affiliated with the Georgia Infirmary then.
If I were to go to Georgia Infirmary on a Tuesday, what would I see?
You'd see the offices first of all, a lot of the social workers that, run the organization, and the director who's there, his name is John Albright. But also you would see the day center. And the day center is a wonderful place where people who are very sick but need socialization come, and they get a meal, and they have activities, and they have transportation for them as well. And it's a wonderful facility. There are also doctors' offices there, so that the people who are the source patients can come and get their primary care.
Now, SOURCE is going to be a word that people aren't familiar with, and let's talk about the SOURCE program then.
All right. SOURCE is a Medicaid waiver program, and it's a unique idea that instead of the state having to pay for their care in nursing homes, they pay for their care through this program, and it's it's given to them as a waiver. So instead of a nursing home, they get care home-based, and they provide other kinds of services like the day surgery. I keep calling it day surgery, the daycare.
So this SOURCE program, this idea was to help people stay in their own homes rather than go to nursing homes. And folks at Georgia Infirmary were the first people to figure out how to get the state to buy in on that and to fund it, and it's grown statewide.
Yeah, and as far as I know, Hunter Hearst was one of maybe the man. He's a fantastic gentleman who he had Catherine Macaulay's lack of fear. He had her. He understood what we were doing, and I understood what he. I mean, it was a mutual exchange there, and and he cared for, as you know, a lot of disabled people, mentally disabled, physically disabled, and still does. And they built the Williams Court Tower that's on Lincoln Street, and that's still flourishing, and it's for people to live in their own apartments, but they have the advantage of the community that lives there. And most of them are elderly, but not all. There's some that are just disabled, and that there's a waiting list, a constant waiting list for that place.
Also, maybe St. Mary's Community Center?
Oh, Lord. St. Mary's Community Center has been there for almost 25 years, believe it or not. And it happened that Mr. Hinchy wanted some sisters to work at the hospital. By the time he came, there were sisters there, but they were older, and there weren't any young ones there. So he recruited, and I was a chief recruiter. It was hard because we're getting older. But anyway, he recruited two people, Sister Pat Baber and Sister Donna Coward, at the same time. And he said, what do you want to do? I just want you to work here. And they said, we'd like to work among the poor. So he said, good. Sister Virginia Gillis was here then, and she helped get them started. And they were put in where they were allowed to use the old St. Mary's School on West 36th Street. It was called Pure Heart of Mary, was the little church that's there. And when Pat and Donna went in there, I mean, birds had gotten in through the open windows, and it was an old school, and it was a wreck. And they cleaned it up and worked on it. And a lot of people volunteered from St. Joseph's Hospital and Candler Hospital to get it started. And one of the things that happened is that they decided that, they didn't know what the needs of the people were. So they were the walking sisters, literally, and they walked through the neighborhood for a long time.
And this would be the Brownsville neighborhood.
Kyler Brownsville neighborhood, yes. And asked them, what do you think you need? And so they started some things, and they worked, but some things that didn't work very well. But ultimately, they had a little preschool, but that lasted I guess a long time. But it's not there anymore because they have the other programs with the city schools and so on. But one of the things they said that they needed was health care. And that was perfect because we were St. Joseph's Candler. So Sister Pat started a little clinic, first of all, and this was another important person. His name is Chuck Powell. Did you ever know Chuck Powell? Yeah. Well, he ran the Cardiovascular Council, and it was for it was to address tuberculosis and other breathing diseases.
Well, also stroke.
Strokes, excuse me. Yes, you're right, stroke.
It seemed to me that Dr. Metz had
Dr.
done
Metz.
some research.
James Metz.
And that we were in the stroke belt.
Right, that's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You got the story right. But anyway, they were operating down at the Georgia Infirmary. They had offices down there. And so Pat got together with Chuck, and they set up this little clinic. And it was kind of primitive at first, and they got some nurses to do blood sugars and blood pressures. That was the big thing. And we worked with Chuck on, going out, reaching out to the barbershops, and we have the African Americans Men's Health Initiative. That with Mr. Shinholster. He was a big friend of ours.
And that'd be Richard Shinholster.
Richard Shinholster, right. Couldn't
And
call his name.
Richard's home church,
Is
he would be Methodist.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Uh-huh.
See, we don't think about what religion they are. I mean, I think that was an important point as I worked through those questions. You don't start out by saying, what religion are you? Because they're probably not Catholic. Most people aren't here. I think in Georgia, in the diocese, the southern half of Georgia, it's only 2.9% Catholic. So you don't start with that. You start with the person and what their needs are, what they have to offer you, and how you can collaborate with them.
In my memory, one of the things about the Community Cardiovascular Council was that they kept good data.
Yes.
And it seems to me that they were actually able to prove
Yes.
that the work that they were doing, which was doing blood pressure work
Right.
and black barbershops.
Yeah.
Also, it seems to me they used to put up, if I remember right, they put up a lunchroom table in the mall and did blood pressures like that. And I remember a story, I think this is, of they did a blood pressure on a man and called an ambulance
Yeah.
and just said, you have to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that.
Yeah. So that that has been one of the things that happened at St. Mary's Community Center, is that the sisters knew that they had to collaborate with other people, and they were good collaborators, but Sister Pat knew you didn't collaborate with everybody. You had to make sure they were simpatico with your values, and she did that. So some people would have all the best intentions, but she said no, thank you. But the Community Cardiovascular Council was one. She also worked with Savannah Tech, because so many of their clients needed, education that could be practical for them. We teased that she worked with the IRS because she does, she prepares taxes. For 20 years, she's prepared taxes. And each year, not each year, but every year, recent years, she's returned $1 million to the city of Savannah for, because the people who come to her, they need that money, so they spend it. And so it comes back to the city of Savannah. And she does about 500 taxes every season. But she collaborates with St. Joseph's Candler. Well, we are St. Joseph's Candler. She collaborates with the coworkers, because retired coworkers, learn how to do it, and they come back every year and help her. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, is this the same Sister Pat that's doing some death penalty work?
No, that was Sister Pat Brown, I think. Yeah. There were 3 Sister Pats for a while. Sister Pat Kennedy, Sister Pat Brown, and Sister Pat Baber. But I'm talking about Sister Pat Baber. She's the director of St. Mary's Community Center and St. Mary's Health Center and Good Samaritan Clinic.
Well, I'm glad we got our Pat straight.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Right. Other outreach and other collaborations that you'd like to make sure we hear about?
Trying to think. Well, during the COVID, we collaborated a lot with the black churches, the African American churches, and would go, to their services and try to reach the people to offer them the vaccines, and got their we had a couple of meetings with their pastors who, you know, we wanted to make sure they were on board, and then they would help convince their parishioners it was okay to get this vaccine. Oh, good Lord. The city schools, we've partnered a lot with them. We started a program to get people interested in nursing and nursing assistants at Beach High School. We, let me see. And we've been part of the different agencies that have grown up to help address poverty in the city, like Step Up Savannah with the neighborhoods. Sister Pat was very involved in that. That Savannah Safety Net, we're no longer a part of that, but we were involved, especially in the beginning when Dr. Diane Weems was in charge of that. We made a lot of good connections through that at that time. And now we have, with the city of Savannah, we have a home ownership program. And there's an organization called, I think it's CHSA. I always forget how the letters go. But the director is a lady named Anita Smith Dixon, who's a dynamo. And basically, she had a program with the city of Savannah employees whereby they coach them and try to help them get people who want to buy their own homes in Savannah and around the area of Savannah. And she hired people who were experts at these free loan programs with mostly federal. They were federal. And they would provide down payments. And she wanted to look for other big employers in the city who would buy into that program. And so St. Joseph's Candler was very interested. So each year we started out giving a little piece of money, like $5,000, and now with $15,000, we gradually increased it. But I think something like 45 of our employees have been able to buy their own homes. And that collaboration is a great one with the city of Savannah. They're our clear partners. In fact, before Mayor Van Johnson was elected, we were at one of the city council meetings and to present this check that we were going to get. And he, just this councilman, recited our mission. He said, "Rooted in God's love, we treat illness and promote wellness for all people." I almost fainted because, unless you're in it every day, you don't usually think of the mission statement, but he did.
Speaks well of both.
Yes.
It really does. I'm guessing that other people and other organizations have noticed this partnering and this cooperation and this ability to notice what needs to be done and find a way to respond to it that we've been hearing about. Have there been a national? Has there been recognition nationally or regionally that's noticed some of this work, or are we going to be the first people to actually hear about all of it kind of at one time?
Yeah, well, we've been recognized it was very exciting. In 2004, should I go on?
Yeah. For a second.
No, we're down. Sorry.
We'll keep it rolling.
Okay. In 2004,
One sec, sorry.
okay.
Just so we can. Mickey, you gonna stay out?
Get something off the bookshelf.
Yeah.
Sorry.
By all means.
Hello.
You're fine.
That's okay.
Don't worry about it.
Excuse us.
I probably had everything.
It's probably better to.
No, hey,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
we can use a break.
Yeah.
Let's cut for a sec.
That
I
stuff
can.
over there.
Okay, ready when you are? Thank you. And the as soon as Mickey sits, you can go, Tom,
I'm down.
anytime.
I know there are a couple of more or efforts that St. Joseph's has been involved in that you'd like to share. We'd love to hear about that.
Well, the one thing that has happened with all of these projects is that our coworkers have been involved in helping with them. I mean, they're sort of proud of what we do, but we have one group called the Angels of Mercy that is still functioning. We meet every month. And they started when the Olympics were in Savannah. And Brian Griffin, I believe, was the person that started them. And so he gathered volunteers to help with the Olympics. And then the group continued looking for, basically they do one work of mercy every month. They go to Williams Court. They love going there. Everybody loves that. They go to the Savannah City Mission downtown. They help with parties for children that maybe don't have parties very often. Like we're going to Our Lady of Lourdes to the Hispanic community tomorrow, Sunday. Not tomorrow, but Sunday. But the Angels of Mercy are a group of men and women, and they do all kinds of things in the health system. There's a nurse, there's, of course, Brian and mission services people, and they get together and find out what's needed in this town. And then they make effort. Somebody takes charge. They're the person who's in charge of the activity and gets all the information and brings it back to the group. Then we ask the people who work at St. Joseph's Candler to bring it in, whatever they need. Like one of the things we do is collect toiletries for children during the summer that they're maybe homeless or don't have the money to buy, especially young teenagers that don't have the resources to buy what they need. And we collect those, and then we have a connection, another connection with the city schools. One of the social workers who used to work for us, now she's the point person for that. So the Angels of Mercy do amazing things. They refurbish. In the beginning, we worked with building together, rebuilding together, and we had teams that went out every Saturday for a couple of weeks, helping people with needing painting and repairs to their house, and we had a good time. I mean, it builds the the camaraderie, if that's a word, that among the coworkers.
And are we talking about 10 people or 1,000 people or 80 people? How big is this?
Well, the Angels of Mercy has a board. It's about 10 people or maybe 12, and we meet every month. But they're not the only ones that do the work. So on Sunday when we go to Our Lady of Lourdes, with the Hispanic children, there'll be probably 30 or 40 people. Depends on what yeah.
And then you'd also mentioned the African American Center.
Okay, the African American Resource Center was started before I came here, but it was started by Mr. Hinchy and a man named Dr. Alan Zhao, who was the attorney for Savannah State. And he's not there. He's not there right now. But he was saying this would have been 1998, I guess, around there, 99, and he was saying, the African American community doesn't have computers, so they miss out on a whole lot, and so he wanted to start an agency that addressed the digital divide, and they were very successful in transforming a pharmacy on Abercorn Street and into the African American Health Information and Resource Center. So it provides health information and resources for that community or anyone who comes through the doors. They have They have a bank of computers that people can use where they can do their resumes or whatever they need to do. Or the lady who's in charge, the director, Ella Williamson, she started a website called, and I want to get it wrong, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a website for giving you all the information, whatever it is, whatever you need. Like, for example, if you needed a doctor for your baby, you could look that up, and they would list all the doctors that are available, the ones that take Medicaid, the ones that don't. It gives you complete information, and it's kept up to date. It's called Hero. I remembered. Hero Help Me is the name of the website. So that's a big advantage there.
Well, as we've talked, it's clear that the St. Joseph's County Health System has reached out into many different parts of the community and has crossed many boundaries in terms of how people see themselves connected to a faith home, in terms of race, income, class, etc. That you can't listen to this and not notice that. I'm curious, have other people noticed this? Have you received recognition about some of this work from national or regional partners or that sort of thing?
Yeah, we received a really big honor in 2004. It's called the Foster McGall Prize. And how much money did we get? We got money, a prize for the recognition, and that's a national award given by the American Hospital Association, AMA. So it was a big deal. And then in 2013, we received from the Catholic Health Association, which we're members of, we received their recognition award for our outreach efforts. And they came to St. Mary's particularly and were impressed with the collaboration with Savannah Tech and just generally that whole operation and what it was. And we didn't receive money there. We received this huge plaque of Jesus that we were disappointed really because it was insured for $3,000, but Pat said we'd rather have the money. Don't give us the plaque. But anyway, we were honored by that of course. Yeah, that's a national award too.
Well, since we're talking about these national awards, et cetera, I do want to ask just a little bit different question, which is, as medicine has become increasingly corporatized, and as the providers of corporatized medicine continue to swallow each other up and grow and become giants, I mean, how do you think about that, given the way that you and the health system think about its mission?
Yeah, I think our organization has capitalized on the fact that we are locally owned and locally governed. So you're right, we're not a part of a big system. And they have sort of put some pressure on us to join in the past, not recently, to join a big system. And the Sisters of Mercy hospitals are largely in these big systems. Now, Mercy Hospital Baltimore is not either, and they're a perfect example of collaboration, and they have their doctors involved. I mean, and they're right in the city of Baltimore. They're not in the suburbs. So Mercy Hospital and St. Joseph's Candler are alike in that they're locally owned and locally governed. And it works for us. I don't know that it could work for everybody, but it works for us. And I remember when we were doing the doing the negotiations, you know, when the men found out that your money would have to go to Philadelphia, that did it. You know, they wanted to take care of their own money in Savannah. So, excuse me. So, you know, it's that value of it being locally owned and locally governed that has worked for us. It's worked very well for us.
Absolutely. Would you have any other thoughts about why working across faith tradition boundaries is important?
Oh, Lord. Absolutely. I mean, it's just so rich. It is so rich that you're not closed in on your own people, that you look out and you know this person and that person. Like Arnold Tenenbaum is an example. My Lord, he was a wonderful man and very devoted to St. Joseph's Candler. And we learn a lot about how the Methodists operate, and they learn a lot about us. And we respect that. I mean, that respect is, it's so important.
And then, I know you're a former teacher. What would you say to kids today to sort of help them see this, that we have to find ways to look beyond our own bubble, if you will?
Yeah, you know, I think they have to be educated, you know, with their brains, but I think they have to also experience. And, you know, I remember one time it was just...
Hold on for just 1 second. Could you just please use the word kids when you start that? Because they...
Okay.
it-
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sure, I apologize.
No.
Okay, as far as the future and the kids that we're trying to educate now, that education is a big thing, but also I think experience for them. I remember I have three nephews. They were little boys then, and my dad grew vegetables. We had tons of tomatoes, and I was going to take him into the city to a house called Emmaus House that, you know, fed the poor. And so we went in, and the boys came with me, and they looked around, and it was a row house in Baltimore City. Looked around, they said, "Where's their yard?" I said, "They don't have a yard." "Where do they play?" "They play on the street a lot of times." They, you know, now see, I'm sure they remember that. But I'm not suggesting that we take them all in the city, but if you can provide experiences of real life people and real children that would be their peers but are different from them, and prepare them for it, prepare them what they're going to learn. And I mean, that's one thing I can suggest. And to put them in situations where they are exposed to those other children.
Let me ask you one other question, if I may. How do you think about the difference in what might be thought of as good works and social justice? Or is there a difference?
No. I mean, I think, well, if I understand the words that you're using, you know, I think there are, let me see. I certainly believe in social justice, but I think the way people can be converted to do social justice is through the experience. You know, with people like the migrants, for example, those are a big group that I particularly, and other people, of course, in the organization, are very attentive to, and their plight and all the bad press they get. But once you know the stories, there's a saying, and I can't remember who said it, but it says, "There is no one you cannot love once you've heard their story." Once you've heard their story, there's nobody you can't love. And maybe you could say there's no one you can't respect. But
So it sounds like for you, I mean, it's a wheel, if you will. I mean, good works allows people to come in contact with one another. And as people come in contact with one another, some people come to consciousness, to a certain conscience about what's going on and about what needs to go on, and that's where the social action emerges. It sounds like that's what you're helping me understand. That,
Yeah.
yeah, that there's an experience or a moment or something happens with someone through the experience of another person, and then that opens their eyes to the bigger picture, the environment, the policy.
Right. I experienced that especially in the jail when I worked in the jail, because the young women who were locked up were there mostly because they couldn't afford the bail. Some of them they were accused of terrible crimes, but most of them weren't accused of terrible crimes. They had a small bail, but they didn't have that small bail, so they stayed locked up. And then when they went to court, they got time served, and so they got cut loose, and then they came back. And, before I came to St. Joseph's Candler, we started a house for women called Marian House, and to take care of that very need so that women didn't have to come back to jail. That's been very successful, not because of me, but because, the people who have worked there subsequently.
Just one other question, because this is so interesting, because in Savannah right now, I mean, there's an organization that's worked really hard in the past couple of years to try to figure out this cash bail issue.
Yes, yes.
And quite frankly, they've been clobbered. So how do you, someone who was working or working in jail in what year?
1970, no wait, I finished there in 1985. So I was from 8 years, 77, I guess I went.
From the late 70s until now, so that's like the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 50 plus years. Same issue, same struggle. I mean, how do you maintain your sense of hope and possibility and optimism?
I think one or two people at a time is the only thing, and just to like we did there. I mean, at Marian House, for example, now the place that got started with me with the work, that was a collaboration with a whole bunch of agencies, the church, who didn't want us in their neighborhood, all kinds of people who didn't want us in their neighborhood. But we did find a place, and they take each woman and they try to help her find out what her needs are. Often it's children. They have children. They're drug addicted or alcohol addicted, and they give them what they need, 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 at a time. And then they graduate into second stage housing, and finally they get their own home. It's the perseverance, not giving up. I mean, that's one thing I see. But in those days, people were more open to helping them than they are now. I mean, they're not prisoners or, it's horrible, the number of people that die in our prisons today, or people that don't even belong in prisons. And those girls in the jail that I minister to, they were not all that different from the girls I taught at Mercy High. They were young girls. In fact, one time I was on the elevator at Mercy Hospital, and this girl got on and she said, and I knew her, but I couldn't remember if I taught her or she was locked up. So she said, are you still working down there? And she pointed, the jail is right near. And I said, oh no, I'm doing something different. But that's how they were the same. And they needed the attention and just the care that they were not getting.
Well, if I were to say that in listening to you, one thing that comes to my mind is that what we need to invite people to do is find a way to make a difference. And if people will do that, they will become different and the world will become different as well.
Amen. That's right. Yeah. I mean, we have to be brave enough to stand up for the right thing, the good. And I mean, if you take the scripture, the Catholic scripture, or the Christian scripture rather, Matthew 25, how you're going to be judged, with these basic things: feeding people, visiting the sick. Yeah. I mean, I think we believe that that's can happen if we persevere, if we don't give up.
I think this might be a good time for us to give up, because that's a perfect ending in my mind.
Oh, thank you.
That we don't give up.
No. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been really very powerful.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so glad to have met you finally. Hunter talked about you all the time.
I gave Hunter a lot of trouble. Well, Hunter and I collaborated, to your point about collaboration. I mean, the Medicaid waiver program.
Yep.
I mean, Gary, well, oddly enough and interestingly enough, Sheldon Tenenbaum. Now that I think about it.
Oh, really?
I mean, Sheldon was a citizen advocate for a man named Gary Foss. And Gary, let's just say, knew Hunter very well and was a very complicated guy. But getting the state of Georgia to open that Medicaid waiver program up was really, Sheldon went and used his social capital with Jim Ledbetter. And then Hunter down here was, it was outside ball, inside ball. Sheldon was doing outside ball, Hunter was doing inside ball. And that's how the whole Medicaid waiver program finally came to Georgia. So,
wow.
But again, just tied back to Arnold and the Tenenbaum family.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. How about it?
Yeah.
You I don't know if you remember this lady, but she was one of Sister Pat's clients. Her name was Dolores.
Dolores Wilson.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
she lived in the Summit house.
Absolutely.
Oh, gosh.
Delightful.
We loved her.
Yep. I saw Richard Lane last night at the music festival, who had been
Oh.
our advocate for 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did what we called a kitchen table financial management. He went over to her apartment every month, and they did the bills together and all that, and that's how it started. And then when one of the hurricanes came, Dolores evacuated with Richard instead of having to evacuate on a public bus. And this time, Richard lived on 65th and Abercorn in a lovely mid-century modern home. And when I would tell that story, I would say they lived an eighth of a mile and worlds apart.
Yep.
But then they found each other, so yeah.
Yeah. Sister Pat has great stories about Dolores, because she worked there for a while,
Which was,
Yeah.
Which she appreciated, enjoyed so
Yeah.
much. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And see, we had people from St. Joseph's Candler who visited her when she'd be in the hospital, and take her things. And Manzana Blakely, do you know Manzana?
I do think I do.
Yeah, she's our event planner.
Okay.
She's a great woman, and she took a special interest. And they taught her to read some, Cat in the Hat.
Yeah, well.
Green eggs and ham, I remember.
And that's what, and I remember Dolores, that was a thing for her. And she wanted to, And a great example of someone that was never schooled, because people assumed she could not be educated because of her label.
Yeah. We had women in the jail like that. You had 25, I think 25% of the people who were locked up in the women's detention center, at least, were psychiatric patients. But some of them were great. They were characters. You could write a book about them. There was one called Ethel Perez. She said, "I'm a mistake." She said, "My mother told me I was a mistake." But she was she got me into more trouble. But
Good trouble, I'm sure.
some good trouble, yeah. One day she could get really angry, and she wasn't locked up anymore, and she came in to visit somebody, and she was mad. And I was going to go out and try to calm her down. And the officer said to me, "Don't you dare." She just wouldn't let me. She said, she could kill you, because she was big. I said, I know, that's Dolores. That's Ethel. But anyway, She got hit by a car crossing the street one day, going to get cigarettes.
So let me ask you, did you know Mary O'Brien here?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
We're gonna interview her daughters.
Oh, she is the niece of Sister Angela Eberwein. She's one of their nieces.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Now this is Jane. It's Jane's mother, Jane's daughter,
Wait, now.
Mary O'Brien.
Mary O'Brien, the daughters that I know are Ann O'Brien Fuller, and Helen O'Brien, and then Rob and Pat O'Brien. So Mary, I guess, would be in her 90s.
Oh, no.
I mean, she's passed away. But she was, to my experience, very active as a layperson, but very active in both good works and social justice.
Yeah.
And-
No, it's not the same person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
But Jane O'Brien was her husband's name Pat too, Pat O'Brien.
Okay. Mary O'Brien's husband was Tom O'Brien, who was a CPA who died of a heart attack early. And so she raised, you hear that she raised 8 kids as a single mom and
Wow.
all that. And then
Wow.
we kind of, when she got the kids out of the house, then she turned her attention to the larger community through her eyes as a Catholic.
Yeah.
And I think she might be the oldest white person maybe ever arrested for civil disobedience out of Chatham County.
Good girl.
She was arrested, I think, in Kings Bay when she was 80. So anyway, yeah, that's great. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Tom.
No,
thank you so
It's
much. Thank you,
really
guys. Hope I didn't give you too much trouble, and I didn't pay attention to
No,
you
you
to your
You did wonderful.
directions.
were a rock star.
You did wonderful. Watch out for this thing over here.
Oh,